The slogan, "Making America Great Again," means different things for different people. This symbol has been used for some as a loaded phrase to inspire hate, bullying, and racial confrontation, while for others it has caused distress and many to be concerned with which direction America is headed. Though a sensitive topic, it is important for us to discuss the obvious separation in our society, the lack of respect for marginalized individuals, and how it has affected the mental health of many. Albeit the slogan is said to be developed as a harmless slogan, it has been weaponized by white supremacists. On today's show, we will discuss the colored history of America and mental health and how the association with greatness does not appeal to everyone, especially those of color. We will also take a look at the correlation between America and mental health and their historical focus on white European males. Welcome to Intake. I'm your host, Bertha Barrett, and I'm here again with my co-hosts, Jules Jean-Pierre and Shauna Sopko. I said it right.
Yes, you did.
Yes. Today's topic is Let's Make Mental Health Great Again. So ladies, as we look at the history of America and the history of mental health and the correlation of the two being focused on white European males, what should we be concerned with when we hear this whole Making America Great Again slogan, because it gives this idea of let's go back to the good old boys days. So what things do you think we should be concerned with?
I think that we should be concerned with individuals mistaking what the harmless slogan was and using that as a weapon against other individuals.
Okay.
And I wanted to expand upon those who are marginalized, because really that's who's being affected quite drastically by this. And I know there's this term that has been coined of the Trump effect, and it's marginalized with people of color, marginalized women,
Right.
Sexual orientation. It's quite prevalent, even handicapped. I mean, we haven't talked about that. That is even with him making fun of an individual during a speech. I don't even remember exactly where that was, but everybody knows about that one. So, yeah.
All right.
So you said something that was very important, and I think it's very key for our audience to know what is the Trump effect.
Exactly.
Right? So the Trump effect, that was originally defined in 2016 by Psychology Today. And basically what it talked about was the increase in bullying in schools caused by rhetoric from Donald Trump. It was used during his professional campaign. Now they revisited it a couple of years into his candidacy, and it included religious and racial bullying by adults, as well as misogyny, sexual assault, and other social unacceptable behaviors.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So, and with all of that being said, it's important because a lot of people are feeling frantic. Literally, they're feeling frantic, and we know that stress is going up, anxiety is going up, because there is a great concern about where America is going. And while we've had other presidents before, who controls this one button, for some reason, now that our current president is in office, it just seems like everybody is like literally becoming, on, pins and needles. They're like really on pins and needles because they don't know what to expect.
Well, it's unprecedented I'm a certain age that I've been around for a few presidents, I think it's exacerbated by the fact that the social media platform that he has, there's always been this respect and sense of decorum, and it's a prestigious role. It's the leader of the free world, the most powerful position in the entire world. And we've always had, and I know we're going to visit this again, but even in more conservative administrations in the past, there's always been a level of that there needs to be conversation, that we're all equal, and and we have things to work on. Where this particular administration, specifically Trump and his tweeting, that is a constant. That it's name calling, and it's bullying, and it's harassing, and it's gaslighting, which I don't know if people know the definition of gaslighting either. I actually had to look that up. The new terminology with this presidency.
Because we want to keep this within the context of mental health. When we look at the history of mental health, we know as we study that back in the day when this whole era of mental health started, it was evolved around white European males, and people with severe issues of mental health, they literally treated them like animals. And they locked them up, and I may mess up this word, in asylums. Thank you. They locked them up in asylums, and they treated them horribly. And so it would be like me saying, okay, and I know it kind of sounds facetious because we did name the show Let's Make Mental Health Great Again, and that's what it was meant to be. But to say that, and knowing that we come from this history of, really downing people with mental health, we can't make it great again. We can only go forward and see how we can improve and now make it great for everybody, because we still have this era of people like with Medicaid. It's hard to get, mental health treatment because this issue of Medicaid, a lot of people don't have the resources if they're in low income communities. And so how do we make something great again when it doesn't apply?
It wasn't great in the first place. No. It was not great in the first place.
If we can even go to with the definition that I gave about the Trump effect, and we talked about sexual assault. Well, if you look at the correlation between making America great again, and we look at the history of mental health and how they treated women, if women presented as a problem, usually the way that they would look at them is that they're undersexed, and then they would treat them a certain way. And so here we go, we're revisiting that in a different way, where we're taking the rights away of women who may consider an abortion. I mean everything, and I'm sorry, but everything for a woman is under attack. You can't get birth control if you go in, and there are so many stories of I go in and I want my tubes tied because I don't want any more children. Oh no, the male doctor says you don't know if you really don't. You might want to have children when you're older, so therefore I'm not going to perform that because you are too young to make that decision. So won't let them get tubes tied. Different insurance companies and corporations are choosing to block women from getting birth control, and now they're blocking them from getting abortions. And so all of these children coming into the world, and there's no help because it's we're pro. We're not really pro life. Those people who they just want to control women's bodies. And on the flip side of that, where you talk about a woman who wants to get her tubes tied, not too long ago, if a male decided that he wanted to have a vasectomy, he didn't need his wife's permission.
Right.
How fair is that?
And I think this whole issue with how this slogan, Making America Great Again, has caused so much racism. Well, it hasn't caused it. It's been there.
It has not caused it.
It just brought it out.
It gave it permission to run rampant. Yes.
And the very behavior of our current president has caused other professionals, to really assess his behavior. So much so that there's a book out now called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, where 27 psychologists and psychiatrists and those in the mental health field, all of these professionals came together and they assessed his behavior and came up with all of these things that they're now seeing that's going on in society. And there's an increase now of things that we didn't have before now that he's in the presidency. And as therapists, we see the effects because people are coming in and they're being triggered by his behavior. They're feeling stressed, they're feeling anxiety. So we have to talk about these issues so that therapists, for one, will know how to address them. And so people out there experiencing them can know that, hey, you're not out there by yourself, and we understand. And if you need help, that you should go and sit and talk to a therapist.
Right. And let's talk about how, Shauna, you had highlighted that you yourself had to look up what gaslighting means. And so I think this is a perfect opportunity to explain what that means. And in the context of this, when you talk about racism, gaslighting is basically there are individuals who are very aware that racism does and has always existed. However, you will have some individuals who say, no,
it's all in your head.
It's all in your head, or that was a long time ago and we're better now.
We've moved on.
Exactly, when we haven't.
Yep. Why don't you just get over it? If you have a problem with it, it's all about you and not acknowledging and making you think that you have an issue.
Yeah, so we definitely need to talk about these issues. We definitely need to talk about how people can cope with stress, anxiety, all of these. And even if we don't get time to talk about it in today's episode, because it is a lot, we may have to come back again. I know, for one, you're certified in trauma, so am I. You've dealt with different issues. So let's tell the viewers, a lot of trauma. Let's tell the viewers, talk about some of the things that people can do to help them cope with some of the stresses that they're feeling.
Absolutely. Coping skills is definitely something that is needed. And most individuals, like when you say the word coping skills, it sounds like it's this big, arduous process, and it really isn't.
It's very simple.
No.
Yeah.
Very simple things. Self-care.
Yes.
Self-care, taking that time for reflection, for deep breathing, for some calmness.
Yes.
And
Even talking.
Yes, talking to an individual, absolutely, so that you're not alone. Someone is sharing that burden, so to speak, with you, and helping lift that off of your plate.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't understand coping skills can be as simple as finding out what it is that you like. Like for me, music is my way of coping. And if I can just turn on some music and get a groove on and sing, then, it helps anxiety go down, all of that. And so it's about finding those things that you love and taking time out to do it. That's the self-care that we're talking about. You want to take the time out and do that. And it's very important if that anxiety or that stress is so high until you're having a hard time controlling it, that you do go in and sit and talk to a therapist, because we're here to help you work your way through it.
Right.
And people need to understand that it's okay to say, I need some help.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's okay to talk about the issue of society right now with our president in therapy, knowing that the therapist is going to keep, we're supposed to keep it confidential.
We're supposed to keep it confidential.
That the therapist will keep it confidential and not judge you on it.
Absolutely. Something real quickly, I know we're almost out of time, especially when it comes to this topic, a lot of what we're seeing is a sense of a loss of control and helplessness, like that helplessness and hopelessness of what is happening. And I think a wonderful coping skill is to get involved, to actually find something in the community. It can be something tiny, just whatever. It just gets you in an action mode, and to actually say, I'm not okay with this, and I want to help make change happen. And so that is very, very powerful.
I think that's great. So look, guys, we have to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. A lot of stigmas, yes. And people struggle with their mental health. They don't know the difference between mental health and mental illness. We're just going to talk about some things.
It's more acceptable for a male to fight, to be angry, to go drink too much, to go sleep around too much, just that kind of stuff. That kind of behavior is more acceptable than a male to cry, to say I'm scared.
And I believe in prayer. But there are some issues that when you walk outside of that building, they're walking outside with you.
You got it. Let me take an opportunity to go ahead and explain what a co-occurring disorder is. Basically, I like the way that you did it, because that's what it is. They walk hand in hand.
Parents allow the TV to babysit their children.
Gaslighting is basically there are individuals who are very aware that racism does and has always existed.
Remember to continue talking about mental health and how to make yours a priority. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, and we're great. It's good to see you. So, before we begin, just tell us a little bit about your background.
I have been practicing yoga for since I was pregnant. My child is 35, so a while. And I have been teaching yoga for over 20 years. I am a licensed therapist. I went to school in California, grew up in California. So that clearly informs my life and living in pretty much every way possible. I maintain a private practice now that is exclusively trauma recovery and almost exclusively all women, and that is by design. I'm also an activist and have been for many, many years, specifically in the area of racial and gender injustices and equity. Previous life I was a hospital administrator in very large urban settings, serving marginalized communities. And I have been out of that for over a decade now. And so really working exclusively in the wellness industry and partnering with like-minded kinds of organizations. I started a organization called Yoga to Transform Trauma several years back, and we are a 501c3. And one of the things that we do in addition to leadership trainings and teacher trainings and such is that we partner with, like I mentioned, like-minded organizations working in the areas of mental health and social justice and those kinds of issues, which is exciting kinds of work.
Beautiful. Okay, so as you know, today's topic is Let's Make Mental Health Great Again. My host and I were discussing the correlation between American history and mental health history. As a professional, you know, when we study mental health, we realize that most of the modalities that they use previously were, even now, they were focused just for white European males.
Right.
In the same sense, for years, the focus in America has been for white European males. And so now that we have this new appointed president with this whole idea of making America great again, it doesn't apply for all people, especially people of color.
Correct.
Because it appears that, white supremacists, people who just love to be full of hatred has, weaponized it, and the increase of bullying and a whole bunch of other issues have just increased with this whole idea. And so for me as a professional, I would have thought that he would have done better if he'd have said, let's make America great for all. But unfortunately, he didn't. So as an activist, especially as an activist and as a therapist, one who deals with trauma, tell us your thoughts on what is currently going on in our society with this whole issue with Trump and the symbol, the MAGA symbol. Yeah, what is going on with this?
One of the things I find really interesting, and I wholeheartedly agree with you in terms of we deal with clients and we're taught to deal with clients on an individual basis, which means that we bypass full systems. We don't ever take a look at what's happening with communities and populations and society as a whole. And I think that's hugely problematic because it only reinforces oppression on various levels, regardless of whether it relates to gender or race or sexual orientation, whatever the issue is. When we only focus on the individual stuff, we miss the bigger picture. And unfortunately, when we miss that bigger picture, we are continuing to perpetuate on a systemic level, on a community level, community traumas. And this whole Make America Great Again, I would love to think that it was intended for most, but unfortunately, my strong sense is that it was never intended for the majority. Right. That it was, again, a systematized, racialized, and as you nicely put it, a weaponized means of holding on to past kinds of histories, which have been harmful to majority of people walking around this country, unfortunately.
Right. Well, we definitely agree with you. Ladies, what are your thoughts on it, and what would you like to discuss with Catherine?
I think that the MAGA symbol, while Making America Great Again was something that he probably used as a way to collectively bring a certain population together so that he could appeal to them, so that he could utilize their votes. Individuals took that and weaponized it and have used that to, I believe, push their personal agendas that have been hidden for a while.
Exactly.
Yes.
Or when I say hidden, I mean it was just undercover. There are some groups that would say that it's been like that all along. And the president, with his rhetoric, has just given permission to put that on the front table, so to speak.
Exactly.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. And if we are going to be very frank, which I am always a big fan of, the current MAGA hats, I think, are simply a resurrection of the white hoods. And they are dangerous at their very best, and very concerning on obviously a variety of levels.
Yes.
So how, may I ask, what are you seeing coming into your practice? Like, have you seen an increase in just the research that we've been doing? And I know in my own work with people, seeing an increase in bullying, an increase in anxiety, an increase in depression, just an overall sense of almost a hopelessness, because it's like everything that's going on is not for me if I'm a marginalized individual. So I was just wondering if you are seeing that coming into your practice.
Yes. Not only am I seeing in my practice, but I saw two very distinct spikes. One was after the election results had been announced, and literally every single woman that came through my doors for a good solid 2 weeks was literally shook to her core in terms of what this meant. And then I saw the second spike again after the inauguration, and much the same kind of thing. Now what I'm seeing is more this kind of insidious, what does this mean for me, not feeling safe within my body? And I'm seeing that amongst women in general, and I'm seeing it amongst people of color, and particularly women of color.
Right.
Kind of the good news, bad news is that I think on some level it has opened up conversations to some extent, getting people to enter into spaces to be able to have some of these conversations in terms of what does racism mean, how is it prevalent, how is this showing up. But my experience has been that people are terrified, and particularly the white folks are super, super hesitant to enter into any kind of conversations.
Yes.
Super hesitant, and I'm being really generous with that.
Yeah.
There's like, it seems like there is still this idea of, let's just act like this doesn't really exist. Okay. And everybody wants to be ignorant to the fact that it still occurs, but
Right.
it's an issue. I mean, racism has occurred for a while.
Racism is still occurring.
It's absolutely.
Right, exactly.
This is not a past tense kind of issue.
Right.
This is a current
It's never
time,
stopped.
current place issue.
And I think Jules hit on it too, that I think that what we're seeing is he didn't create those people.
No.
He's just giving them permission
Yes.
to, he fueled the fire. And where even as conservative as any other administration has been, there's always been an overarching, at least an idea that we need to be equal. We need to work on this. We know there's an issue and we need to work on it. That has gone out the window with this particular administration. That's the horrifying part for a lot of people. I agree with you wholeheartedly that with both of you that so many white people are still in that. As long I don't see color. I mean, I don't see color, and it's not an issue, and it doesn't exist. Well, that's just exacerbating the issue. We absolutely, our experiences are different. We need to talk about it. And so with this, extremism has opened up a lot more doors for us to be able to talk about it. It's just we need to grab this opportunity and run with it, and that's why we're here. So.
And I love that. And at the sake of going on a limb, which I'm kind of notorious for doing, on some level, let's keep this in context, I'm actually really grateful to this particular administration, because they have opened the door, and I think they have on some level created an awareness that would have been impossible for anybody else to do.
Right, exactly.
Not that I am an advocate of how or the mechanisms or the why or any of those kinds of things. But they have literally created an awareness that has been so underground for so long that it's unignorable. And I don't know if that's a word, but you can't ignore it at this point. And on that level, I'm super grateful because it has given us a forum. And one of the things that really struck me a couple of years ago, I was at a lecture by Michelle Alexander. And my biggest takeaway from her was that she said at this point, the allies, the administration's base and rallying cry is really coming it's basically coming as they are the resistance, not us. And that they are resisting a new way of things and a new way of being and living. And that part that resonated for me because it offered hope. It's not that women and people of color and communities of color and immigrants are the other at this point. It's not that we are clinging or really forcing a new way. It's about that the old way and the old system is finally crumbling. And I'm going to actively go with that paradigm.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that too.
I think that, as you had stated before, that you were grateful for a certain aspect of how things are coming out due to this administration. And I think that as an African-American woman myself, that I can say, yes, I am grateful for the veil being taken off. And I'm grateful for the fact that we have an opportunity, and that's the key word, opportunity, to have those conversations, and that space is now being presented. And I also wanted to ask, with the things that you do as an activist in your circle of hope, how does that come out? What are you able to do for individuals who are seeing those type of things or experiencing those type of things that we're talking about?
Exactly.
In the last probably year and a half or so, I no longer really talk about safe places anymore. I talk about brave spaces, because whether we're talking and working on a collective basis or whether we're talking on an individual basis, safety is never, ever, ever guaranteed. And so I think whether or not we are trying to effectuate change for ourselves, for our families, for our local communities, for our global communities, it's really about knowing that we are ultimately never guaranteed safety. And so can we be brave? Can we take a deep breath, literally? Can we plant our feet so that we feel firmly grounded?
Right.
And then we enter into these kind of brave spaces to have these really challenging and difficult conversations. And that's really one of the goals that I do, regardless of whether I'm teaching a yoga class or whether I'm with an individual working one-on-one, or whether I'm working with other activists and whatever project that we have and whatever movement that we are aligning with in that particular moment in time.
Wonderful.
That gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, I think, especially as professionals, that we need to start having these discussions more. It's a very sensitive topic, but we need to start talking about it because there is an overwhelming amount of people coming in and with anxiety and stress, and it's increasing. And if we keep ignoring it, then how do we help them? We have to be willing to be comfortable to talk about these issues so that we can benefit our clients more. We have to be willing to do that. And I love that term, a brave place. I'm going to use that if that's okay. Yeah, I love that.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't even think about that, but that's exactly, I mean, safe places are, it's a figment at this point of our imagination, really, and being brave. And I think that goes back to vulnerability too, and being able to open up and say, I don't know it all. I may be making a mistake. How are you feeling? Am I contributing to this? And how can we work through this together?
Right.
It's very important.
Well, and I think to even tag on that is, part of white supremacy, whiteness, whatever we want to call it, white privilege. I mean, and on some level, we're talking about semantics here. But that's one of the attributes, is this whole idea of perfectionism. As long as we are going with perfectionism, we don't allow for humanness, and we don't allow for messiness, and we don't allow for awkwardness. And we've got to create spaces in which those things are acknowledged and they're advocated for, because we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to step on toes, and we're going to bump up against each other. So in this creating of brave spaces, can we allow for the fact that we are messy, human, awkward, human beings?
Right.
And can we still enter in and stay in the discussion?
Okay.
I think to tie that all in, it's just an opportunity of being authentic.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. So, Catherine, as an activist, and I love it, as an activist, which we all should be, as a professional therapist, as one who deals with trauma, what would your What would you suggest for our viewers? What would you say to someone who's feeling overwhelmed and who's questioning, okay, what is it worth? Why am I even here if we don't know what's going on with all the chaos? What would you say to that person?
I'm a big advocate for starting at basics. And it's literally about planting our feet so that we can feel the ground beneath us. It's super easy, whether we're talking about individual traumas or collective, to get hijacked in the process.
Right.
So can we literally feel our feet? Can we literally take a breath, which on a physiological level has a calming effect? Can we give ourselves permission to be vulnerable? Can we learn to be embodied? Because I think without that embodiment piece, that's when we start running amok. And that's when we tend to have problems. So I think it's, we spend a lot of time, and so much of our education system is around being smart and cerebral and rational and linear and logical and all those things, that we forget that we have a body that we inhabit on a day-to-day basis. So can we literally get connected with that and feel the sense of embodiment, and that I'm okay in this moment, so that I can do that work that's vulnerable, that's authentic, and that I can enter into relationships that I may not be familiar with.
I really tell people to limit their news intake, maybe limit it to 30 minutes, or 10 minutes.
Right.
I was able to completely stop, and that's because I have a partner who is able to fill me in on the important things.
If you're looking for more information about a topic that was discussed on one of our shows, please visit intake.tv and check out our resource page.
If you're a professional who would like to be on the show, or an individual who has struggled with mental health and would like to be a guest, email us at info@intake.tv.
Follow us on all of our social media platforms.
Okay.
Intake is the place to be.
It's because